If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Almitra Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Hey there, welcome back, Equity Warriors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode focused on the intersection of education and politics here on the 3E podcast. I have a guest today. Her name is Nadia Bennett. She's a former principal and founder of When Brown Girls Lead. She has dedicated over 15 years to transforming schools into anti-racist environments through culturally relevant leadership. As a principal in North Philadelphia, she doubled ELA test scores, increased student attendance, and spiked teacher retention, earning commendation from the New Jersey Department of Education. A proud Black entrepreneur, Nadia leads her firm to ensure equitable education. Her passion was nurtured at Dillard and Howard University, shout out to the HBCU community out there, where she earned her degrees in education administration and policy. She's currently pursuing her doctorate, and to those guests, I always say, I want to be one of the first to call you doctor, so keep me posted. Nadia continues to champion change while enjoying reading, travel, and time with friends. So my honor to welcome you to the show, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. So let's start with North Philly. I've been there. I've been there, spent a good deal of time there, a couple of years that I feel like I literally lived at the Courtyard Inn downtown in working with Philadelphia schools and some of the more challenged schools, if there are any that are more challenged in Philadelphia. But I do remember my time in North Philly. But I want to talk about you and what you did, changes that you made to improve test scores and keep kids coming to school and keep teachers sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely. So North Philly, my work there will be work that will always stay with me for all of my years in education. It is hands down the most impactful time in my life in regards to what I know, the change that I know that I created. And it needed to be a space like North Philly for that kind of change to come about. So to answer your question, a lot of it was, it's going to seem, but a lot of it was passion, commitment, relationships, building trust with parents and with students. That was the foundation, I would say, of what we created. When it comes to ELA scores, because I think this is such an important topic, it's something everybody's talking about right now. And I was an assistant principal that year that we doubled numbers, the first time we doubled number. And one of my roles was managing the humanities teachers, and it was myself and the 10th grade literature teacher, who is also a Black female, that actually got those numbers, right? She has gone on now to be, I believe she's a CAO at another charter still in Philly. She was a phenomenal teacher. But what I would say that she and I had in common, the number one thing I would say she and I had in common, we had high expectations for students. I remember days where, let's say she was just a couple minutes late getting to her classroom, and the students were being just a little bit, let's say I was standing by the door, students were talking a bit, and they could hear her down the hall say, "Good morning, young people." And when I tell you,
that did it.
That was it. They were like, oh, wait, like, he's coming. Let me get to my seat. Let me straighten up, right? And so the expectation that she had for them is, when you enter the threshold of my classroom, you are going to be engaged in learning. You are valued, number one. You are brilliant, number two. And you are going to do the work. And we're going to have a little bit of fun doing the work as well. But because you're brilliant, you're going to come into my classroom, you're going to do the right thing. And so high expectations, I would say, was the key thing that she and I had in common and how we were able to get those numbers. Then you got down to the foundational things. She and I lesson planned together. She and I advocated for certain books in the curriculum. She and I, changed lessons based upon data. She and I held small groups after school. So there was a lot. There's the overarching belief in students that has to exist first, and then all the other things can kind of come under that.
Yeah, we talk about belief in our children, belief in our students, and I'll talk about, I love that discipline side to it too, but that's about kids understanding, I think, and I think back to my own classroom, which kind of sounds a lot like hers did. They knew when I was coming and their behavior changed in a heartbeat, right? Because they know that you care about them.
Yes.
Right? You're not there to collect a paycheck. And I think when our kids know that we care, we love them, we want them to do well, and that we're here for them, that it makes a big difference in their behavior. And then that means they're more engaged. I just love that. Small groups. So, a lot of people also don't think that you can do small groups when you get outside of like first grade. I did small groups with sixth graders. I did small groups with middle school, with seventh graders. I never taught eighth grade. It makes a big difference in the way kids connect to one another, as opposed to sitting there and you being the oracle of all knowledge that there is.
Yes, I agree. And where small groups proved particularly effective for high school students was with writing.
Yeah.
And that's where we focused on that. Like they had throughout class. So I think at that time we were doing 90-minute blocks. I could be wrong, but I believe it was 90-minute blocks. And a portion of the class is that the groups of students would take turns going to the writing small groups. And they had an opportunity to practice their writing skills, because that is an area where our students need to be served better, right?
Yeah.
I refuse to say that is an area of deficit, because I just don't believe anymore in using deficit language when referring to Black and brown children. It is an area where they need to be served better. Educators need to do their work to stop believing that our children cannot do certain things. They can do it if you have the expectation for them and you know how to teach them, right? In a way where it can be processed. If you understand culturally relevant pedagogy, like I just did a session this summer in DC around culturally relevant pedagogy in the brain, and I was speaking to different superintendents and school leaders about culture helps the brain. Well, I mean, not helps. Culture determines how the brain processes certain things.
Right.
And if teachers would take just one extra step to understand a child's culture, right, you can probably deliver it in a way where their brain can better process it. And with that, I must say another thing, because I've encountered a lot of this. Black culture is not violence. It is not drugs. It is not low socioeconomic status. It is none of that. That is a trauma response.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you caress a group of people for so long, that is how they're going to respond. That's any group of people.
That's right. There's a book. You say that. I want to turn around. I know it. There it is. It's called My Grandmother's Hands.
Yes.
And he talks about, have you read it?
I've heard of it.
Excellent in his approach to getting people to understand and recognize that, not only is the behavior response to trauma, but like you said, when people have been oppressed for so long, that trauma lives in our bodies. It's passed through the womb. And so the behaviors our kids learn from us as parents, right, incorporate the response to trauma that we've dealt with, and our parents and grandparents and great grandparents. It goes very far back. And so, we see it. I think we see it because it's called out more in our Black children, but white children who have grown up in traumatic environments have the same responses. People, it doesn't matter who they are, what color they are, where they come from. And one of the things that he documents is that descendants of the Holocaust have those same trauma responses. But we don't talk about that. It's not newsworthy.
We don't
because
go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, yeah, we're probably about to say the same thing because we live in a society where people want to continue to demonize people of color, particularly Black people, to maintain the power structure they have and the caste system that exists in this country. Go ahead.
I agree completely. And if people of European descent are having a difficult time understanding that, I would say look at your ancestors who considered themselves to be oppressed people back in Europe. And when they came over here, look at what they did to others. Mm-hmm. Look at how they killed Native Americans. Look at how they approached slavery versus how slavery was done across the world. That could also be look at hurt people hurting people.
Yes.
right? And so we can justify their trauma, their oppression, etc., and the actions to say, well, they felt, because I used to teach history, so I'm very familiar with manifest destiny, that they felt that they would come over here and, that whole story. We can justify that. But when you see it playing out with the people that you turned around and oppressed, it's somehow you're blaming the victim. Mm-hmm. Right? And so it's a frustrating cycle that one has to constantly deal with in regards to people not being able to know themselves, be self-aware, but then also know their own history and view their own history with that same judgmental, unkind perspective that you view the history of others.
Yes. Amen. You said something about books. Let's go ahead and talk about books. I mean, it's there. Let's talk about books, and the books our kids are given to read or now not allowed to read. As I'll say, one of my pet peeves, if you will, is that all of these things that are coming down, they're saying, well, we can't have that book, we can't have that book, we can't have that book, or that topic. If we're talking, we're both former history teachers, and saying we can't teach history this way, or these topics shouldn't be covered because it makes my child feel guilt or anguish. But nobody wants to talk about the fact that Black and brown people feel guilt and anguish in school every single day. And so my radical self wants to tell my audience, if you're Black or brown and your kids are feeling oppressed in school because history is not being taught in a way that recognizes, affirms, values them and their ancestry, then you need to be the ones filing the complaints and saying, my child is feeling guilt and anguish, so you got to take that textbook out of my classroom.
I agree completely. And I actually saw this recently on the internet. It was a picture of Ruby Bridges. And it said, if this Black child, right? Exactly. If this Black child can face this, which is the photo of her and all the white people around her in protest of her going into the school. If this Black child can endure this, then your white child should be able to learn about it.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody's spitting on your white child. No one is throwing things at your white child. And no one is segregating your white child into a classroom where they have to sit all day long by themselves because nobody else wants to be with them. But you do it to ours.
But your child is so privileged and entitled because of the country that we were born in. They don't deserve to feel pain or hurt. It doesn't quite work like that. It doesn't work like that. And it's a very, like I said, the world is in a place where there's an opportunity for all of us to look at ourselves and look at just how much we justify the actions of ourselves, our group of people, the people that look like us. But we take issue with others. There's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of seeing. I mean, which we know, the lack of being able to see Black people, that's not new. I mean, at one point we were 3/5 of a person, so that's not new information. But I think it's being understood differently in this time. And there's an opportunity. People have to choose which side of history you want to be on in this time.
Yeah. I say, do you want to be if you are even Black folks, let me just start with our own. Black folks who don't want to recognize or accept that our history should be told and taught accurately, that our literature should be recognized and valued for all children to learn from, not just Black children to learn from. I did an episode long time ago about the sunken place and those people of color who essentially do the bidding of racist people to oppress their own people. I just want to say, like Clarence Thomas, because they think it's good for them as an individual, but that's not good for anyone as a person to be. And what kind of self-hate do you have to have if that is your position? Hey there, Equity Warriors. I want to take a quick moment to share something exciting with you. You know how passionate I am about equity in education, right? Well, I've created a special space, a safe space, where we can dive even deeper into these crucial topics. It's our Patreon channel, and I'd love for you to join me there. Here's why it's so awesome. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll get access to exclusive content that I will not share anywhere else. I'm talking additional insights, workshops like you would get in regular professional learning sessions, resources that can really amplify your impact in education. But it's more than just extra content. By subscribing, you are directly supporting our mission. You're helping to create more valuable discussions and resources that you've come to love. You're part of the change we're making in educational systems. And let me tell you, our Patreon community, it is something special. It's a place where passionate educators and advocates can come together, share ideas, and drive real change. So if you're ready to take your commitment to educational equity to the next level, I'd be thrilled to have you join me. Just head over to patreon.com/3E podcast. That's patreon.com/3E podcast. Remember, your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue this important work. Together, we can create the educational system all our students deserve. Thanks for considering, and now let's get back to the episode.
%, and I would, I'll bring it to Jay-Z's 444 album, where that's one of my favorite albums.
Still.
Yeah, yes, no matter what. And he opens that by saying, OJ, like, I'm not black, I'm OJ.
I'm OJ.
Okay. Yeah, okay. You can go on and believe that if you want to, and you just wait and see how soon they can remind you that you are black.
Yes.
Right? And so, but again, that speaks exactly to what you just said about Clarence Thomas. OJ did that at a time where it was for his individual benefit to not associate with us, and we see how that worked out for him. But a story that, not to, let me also say, when I say see how that worked out for him, that's not implying that what OJ did was okay. And that it was bad. I want to make that very clear.
Yes.
He's completely wrong and heinous for what he did. And that's just, let me just put that in the box and put that to the side. But when you brought up the books, it reminded me of a story with books and curriculum, in that the advocacy required to make sure that students are exposed to the right books, the right material, etc. It reminds me, so I would say that the organization that I worked for in Philly, they were actually really good with diversity in books and curriculum. I can honestly say that. I think some of it is Philly itself, because Philly is one city where, like, African American history has been a required course for ninth graders for many years. That's Philly, and I have a lot of respect for that. And so that wasn't our challenge. The challenge there was white people feeling that they had liberties within curriculum that they actually did not have. Here's what I mean by that. It was, so the school where I did my turnaround work, that school was probably about 95 or more % black. There were other schools within that district that were, let's say, 70% black, or even maybe 60% at that time. A white teacher at one of the schools that were more diverse, she was using a recent Kendrick Lamar song. This is when To Pimp a Butterfly came out, and there's a song on there that uses the N-word a lot. You know, Kendrick is a prolific rapper, so I can completely see why a literature teacher would use his music to teach a concept completely. But she chose a song. It was a popular song I can't remember the name of it, but it had the N-word in it quite a lot. And it got back to me, who, though it wasn't my campus, one thing I was known for in that district, we're not going to be, listen, I don't care if them come through my door every morning or not. If they black and brown, I'm going to say what I got to say.
Yes.
It got back to me that she was teaching using the Kendrick Lamar lyrics, but had left the N-word in the lyrics, and the white students in their process of learning were allowed to say the N-word with their black peers in the classroom. I called the curriculum director at the time. I didn't even know the teacher. I'd never met her in person, didn't need to. I called the curriculum director, asked who is this grade teacher at this campus, and I shared with them what was happening. And she was frustrated with it as well, but the approach that she took at the time was, well, let's use this as a learning opportunity. So the three of us got on the phone. The three of us got on the phone one morning, and I was explaining to this young white woman why it was inappropriate to allow white students to say such a derogatory term period, and especially in front of their black and brown, peers. And I asked her, can you put yourself in the seat of those black students hearing their white peers say that over and over again? She decided that morning to contend with me and say that she thought that it was okay because black people use the word all the time, and that black people use it in lyrics, and that the black students use it. So you can imagine how that conversation went. And I taught her a lot of things that morning. But one thing I recall saying to her, I said, how do you think that white students would feel if their black peers were allowed to call them crackers throughout your lesson in the classroom? I said, how would you feel if I, as a black woman, walked up to you and called you a cracker? And she got quiet. I said, that's where
that word does not even begin to touch the emotion and the history of violence that's embedded with the N word.
I agree completely. And even though it doesn't, she could not handle, because she knows what the word means. She could not handle the thought of somebody thinking that her actions be perceived as racist or like a dislike or prejudice towards black people, because, that's just where some of them are. She couldn't handle the thought of it. And that's when she got quiet. And now, okay, I want you to amplify that by about 10,000 and tell me how your black students feel. So those are the kinds of conversations that, and when sure enough, by that next semester, all that had been removed. She did that. No, you're no longer allowed to use this song when, teaching curriculum, etc. And that conversation, I want to say this for my school leaders who are still in these positions, and they are in the current challenge of how do I handle books being banned, etc. It is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. I cried after that conversation, actually. Yeah. And I cried because it was such an emotional weight on me to not say all the things that I really wanted to say, right? And to be frustrated with the fact that these conversations even still had to happen. But we have to have those conversations. If I had not made a choice that morning to say, okay, nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to make the phone call. And I'm going to take on the, potential recourse that may come from this. People may look at me different. The curriculum, director might feel some type of way that I said it. Fine, do what you have to do. But I'm not going to sit around and know that this is happening to black and brown children and not say anything. So I just said it as an encouragement of what you're experiencing is not new. It's been going on for a long time. They have been trying to ban books and, teach history the wrong way, teach literature the wrong way, because they have a history to hide.
Right? Yes.
So
yes.
We just got to keep standing up. We got to keep talking. We got to keep saying this is unacceptable. We just have to do our parts.
Yeah. I've had the book banning conversation several times on the show, an episode I did by myself and several others in conversation with other people. And one of the things I note, and for people to recognize, we think, well, it's just a few books, whatever. We have banned in the United States in these last 4 years since this nonsense, 5-6 years. We know when this started, when a certain person claims to have been elected. We have had more books banned and removed from our schools than Hitler banned in Nazi Germany. And we he is like the perennial bad guy along with the Soviet Union in our K-12 curriculum. He is always Mr. Evil. He wasn't as bad as we have been. And we need to, we have to, this country's done a great job of not teaching us true history, so we don't recognize just how bad it is. But as we start to realize and recognize, as we're understanding just how far they've gone, we've got to think about how much further it can go and how dangerous it is right now as we are starting to piece by piece dismantle quality instruction and, in essence, creating another generation of people who are enslaved because of their lack of understanding and knowledge about what has really happened in this country, this great experiment called America.
I agree completely. And I would say that school leaders have to make a choice on so there's a phrase for leadership that's referred to tempered radicals, right? Mm-hmm. There's this author that believes that tempered radicals are the people within a school system that can see the prejudice, the racism, the sexism, et cetera, happening and be tempered. They're radical in their beliefs, but they're tempered enough to stay in the system and create change within the system,
yes.
Right? I use the term, I say that I am radical. Like I can only be so tempered. That is just who I am, and I don't fight who I am. I'm not trying to be anything else. I am radical, right? And so if a leader or a teacher is seeking to, okay, where do I want to fall in this? And how can I create change within my locus of control? A tempered radical might say, okay, so I can't teach these books in the curriculum. I'm going to start an after school program.
There you go.
And I'm going to make sure that we read certain books, and I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make sure students want to come. I'm going to have guest speakers. I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to make sure teachers and students get exposed to these books. The radical might say, I'm going to buy these books myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to use an in-house copy, and my children are still going to get these books. Now, you come in here, you might not like what you see, right? But this is right. You might not like what you see, but this is the choice. So we have a choice of how we want to respond, how we choose to respond, because, I'll just leave it there. We have a choice on how you want to respond. So they just have to choose. Do I want to take the tempered radical spot or the radical spot? But there is still and always is space to create change, even when things are this bad.
Yeah, I guess I have to put myself in the radical camp. And the issue when I was in the classroom, and part of the reason for my leaving the classroom was it really did boil down to reading, even 20 plus years ago, and me deciding it was better for my kids to use an approach to teaching reading that would work for them than to toe the line of the district and use what was not working. And so I did it. I got caught, but I did it anyway. I did the same thing with English language development for my emergent bilingual learners. They had this, I can say it, this crappy program that did nothing for them in terms of teaching them. And, even though my kids were pretty much all Black, Brown, and Southeast Asian, even the Black kids were emergent bilingual learners. They didn't speak school English, so everybody needed instruction. So again, I had their little kit that I was supposed to use. It set up on the shelf. It was prominently displayed, and I had a copy on my desk from the teacher's guide, just in case I had to be in compliance when somebody walked in the room. But we did what worked, right? Radical. You might not like what you see when you come in my classroom, but you know what? My kids learned. And so I think we do need both. And I'll just say this is part of the reason that I work for me now, working for myself, is because I could not be that tempered radical, not in the school system, not in corporate America. I just, I got tired of biting my tongue. And so, hats off to the tempered radicals. We need you there.
Yeah. Same for me. What I would say in my younger years, because I was an assistant principal in North Philly, a high school with 1,500 kids, turnaround environment. I was 28 when I did that.
You were a child.
I was still somebody's baby. Listen, let me tell you something. I was a child, right? And so, because I, at that time, very confident, very intelligent, very skilled, but had not done the personal growth and development to come into a place where I could no longer play the game, right? I would say in my first several years of leadership, I did play the game because I thought that's what I had to do, right? So I did play the tempered radical role, right? I would have been the one, having the after school program. We had plays at the high school. We had a Stay Woke play before Stay Woke was even a thing. Right. The kids always, let me tell you, I played no games, and anybody that worked for me, they would, I was never a perfect leader, but these things around diversity, curriculum, inclusion, anti-racism, they already know that was what Bennett was all about. But it got to the point after so many years, it was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be silent anymore. I can't be in an environment. And when I say silent, I mean a forced silence. Because after I was a principal, I went on to be an executive director in a different organization. And that's the place where I began to feel a forced silence. Mm. Like I came in with too much knowledge, too much passion. And it made the people, the chiefs of the organization, all of them male, most of them white male, it made them very uncomfortable. It made them very uncomfortable. Now, in my own self-reflection, are there some things that I could have said differently? Sure, right? But that doesn't stop the fact that I was always speaking truth, right? And I was advocating for the children. And so it got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, I have to. I didn't even know what my own thing was going to be, but I was like, I got to start my own thing because I just can't do it anymore.
Is that how you got to when Brown Girls Lead?
Yeah, internally, that's how I got there.
So tell us about it. Tell us about When Brown Girls Lead.
Oh, my baby. So When Brown Girls Lead is my consulting firm. I'm an education consultant working with K-12 schools. And I work with school leaders to create an anti-racist school environment, foster inclusion. And I do all those things through culturally relevant leadership development. Right. So I'm in schools helping principals, executive directors, and even sometimes superintendents create systems and structure that lean towards anti-racism. Right. So that could be anything from looking at their behavior systems and structures and figuring out how can we make this more on the positive side so it better serves all children. That could be looking at their academic scores. Right. And seeing, oh, well, your, Black and brown children are performing significantly lower than their white peers. Yeah. Let's look at block scheduling, right? Let's look at the systems that might help this. Let's look at teacher diversity. Let's look at what the teachers are teaching. Let's look at teacher mindset. There's something there that we can work with. So looking at all the data and then coaching and supporting leaders to get where they need to be in regards to like having a district that better serves all children. How I got there, I got tired. I got tired. I have done some absolutely excellent work in school leadership, and I can also say that I have never felt psychologically safe. I've always known walking into the room that once I open my mouth and people hear me speak, discomfort was going to take over the room. My intelligence and my passion, and I can say this from a sober place. I'm not an arrogant person at all, but I can say with confidence that I am highly intelligent and I am very passionate, and that has shown up in my career throughout my entire life. That makes people who are not confident in themselves and who do not believe that a woman, a Black woman,
there
right?
you go, right,
should be in this space educating them on. So, I mean, I've had a white, well, we're not going to go there, but because I can go on and on, but I got tired. Yeah. And then when I decided I would take a break and people began to reach out and say, hey, can you apply for this full-time position, that full-time position? I said, no, I'm not looking for anything full-time. I'm not interested. And I said to one of the schools, I said, but I'll come in and I'll coach your principals. They were in a particular, they had a very specific need. And that they had just hired several new principals. They were in like a turnaround kind of space and needed the principals to be coached up. I said, hey, I respect you. I respect the work that you're doing. I'll come and I'll coach your principals. And that's when Brown Girls Lead. There you go. That's how it happened.
So you said when you talked about When Brown Girls Lead, you touched on, and I know I didn't get them all, anti-racism.
Yep.
I was like, I had like four. I should have written them down and gotten some notes. But I'm thinking that all of these things, we don't think about school politics. And I don't mean the internal politics in a school, but I mean the external state, school board, state government, even local government, and how it impacts what you're able to do in schools. And I think working in anti-racism and DEI spaces, like you do, like I do some of, is extraordinarily hyper political right now. And so, as a radical, how do you, or what would you say is important for people to be, whether they're the tempered radical inside the school or the radical inside or outside of the school? How important is political activism for them in order to get schools to be anti-racist spaces? And then let's talk about teacher recruitment in the same topic, same vein.
Yeah. So there is a very compounded nature in this, particularly for Black women that might be seeking to do this work, in that you're coming into this work double marginalized and with a triple consciousness. Triple consciousness would be American, Black, and female, right? We all know Du Bois coined double consciousness, and that's an amazing work, and it was mainly written from the male perspective. Well, how does this work if I'm female, right? Yeah. So the things that we know in regards to society is that women are not encouraged to network, build political relationships. They're not encouraged to build relationships that can help to serve the vision that they might be trying to build. And so what I had to do, I'm not going to tell anybody else what they had to say, what I had to do is first recognize that I had been operating under a false belief on where I, as a woman, was supposed to be and the work that I was supposed to be doing. I remember being even like a principal and an executive director, and I used to say for many years, I don't like networking, I don't like policy. Like when I was an executive director, I had the mayor's number in my phone, right? It's mayor's number in my phone, and I did not have, I would say, the self-awareness or I hadn't been taught as a woman how to maximize those relationships. That's just what it is, right? Because that's just not what we're socialized to do. So the first thing I had to realize is that, number one, my thinking was all wrong, right? And that I had to do some self-work to unlearn what society had taught me and to relearn what was necessary to get to the next level of this arena of anti-racism and of advocating for children. And that took a great deal of unlearning. So once I went through that process of unlearning, I would say politics all begins with relationships and relationships with purpose, coming into it with respect for what another is doing and how can we both benefit from this. And that's not wrong. Understand that the relationships, I'm not saying that these people are your best friend, your husband, your wife, your partner, your spouse, which that's a completely different thing. There are professional relationships in which we work together and we work together effectively. We both can come out as winners for this. And if you're doing that in the effort of Black and brown children, I want the women to hear that that's not wrong. It's not manipulative. It's none of that, because that's what we have been taught. And we belong in those spaces as well. And so I had to position myself to be more open to building relationships, right? And once you start building those relationships, what happens is the curtain is moved and you begin to see what's really being talked about, right? And you begin to see that most people are coming into meetings with an agenda, and that agenda they have a clear end game to that agenda. That end game may be something you can see. Oftentimes it's not something that you can see. And you're being guided, strings are being pulled, the puppet strings constantly through conversation to meet that person's agenda. And so once you understand that truth about politics, you can navigate that space in a way of integrity. That's number one. But then a place where you can be even more of an advocate for Black and brown children.
Yeah. So I was a political science major as an undergrad. So I understood politics. But like you, never taught, socialized as a Black woman that it was a space for me. See, I felt like I could work for someone who was a politician. I could understand politics, and I did that, and understand how things got done. But, in my early years, in college and just coming out of college, while I was beginning to work in that space, I didn't have a seat at the table. I might have had a seat at the room, but it was essentially to serve the others that were in the room, to feed the information, not to be the source of information other than I had pulled together the briefs and here's your information, right? I didn't understand and had not been taught that I needed to develop relationships if I wanted to move anywhere beyond that particular space. And it was a manager I hate to call her manager, she was a leader that I had in educational publishing in corporate America, who told me one year, that my performance goal for the year, she was going to base my evaluation primarily on my ability to learn to schmooze, as she called it, to be able to get into spaces and have those conversations, something that we're not taught to do anywhere, right? She said, this is your task for this year. She said, we are both intelligent, highly intelligent women. She said, you're smart. You know your stuff. What you have to do is get comfortable talking to people on a personal level that you don't know, so that you can get that information to them. And so, it was Phoebe Tate told me I had to learn to schmooze. And I tell you, I did. I took that as a charge. And I think that, one of the things that women in particular, women of color, one of the things, there's something, see, we could start a new project and teach young brown girls how to get into that space and what to do once you're inside of it. Because as long as that space is governed by overwhelmingly white men, we are never going to be taught in any sense how to move in that space. We're going to have to teach each other through community schools and community organizations, whatever it is. But we have got to, I need something else to do. We have got to teach each other how to do that.
I agree completely. And I would say that just to give a couple of tips now, because there may be someone right now that's in that space trying to figure it out. When you begin to build those relationships and you begin to move in these political spaces, words, always remember, words are less important than action. Now, we've heard that all our life. We've always heard action speaks louder than word. We know that.
Yeah, kids won't care how much you know until they know how much you care, blah, blah, all that stuff. Yeah.
But when you're in these spaces, the gift of gab and the charisma, it's very easy to forget that thing that we all know. And so you want to invest in, spend time with people who have put action behind the work that you are trying to achieve. If you don't, you might find yourself running up against a brick wall because people know how to talk. They know how to talk the talk, right? And so you want to look for people that have put action behind it. The other thing I would say is, as you become more comfortable in this space, do good work.
Yes.
When you do, the reason that I was able to transition, though I had a lot to learn, I was able to transition in it kind of easily is because my work had gotten me noticed. My work had people talking about me before I got into the room. And so they were willing to listen. Do good work and the right people will notice. And then once you have their ear, it's all about the agenda and it's all about pushing that next goal for Black and brown children.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Sure.
And, I think I told you ahead of time, I always want my guests to let people know that, when I sign off, it's with that quote, paraphrase of Dr. Angela Davis's quote, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. So what is one thing that you cannot accept? And then what can listeners do to support that change? One thing you cannot accept.
This probably is not the thing that people would expect me to say, but it is where I am right now in my truth. What I cannot accept, regardless of race, is ineffective school leadership. I am tired of it. I really am tired of it. There's so much research around how good leadership can impact student outcomes over a course of 3 years versus poor leadership impacting student outcomes. And with me being in schools nationally at this point, I'm everywhere. I'm all along the East Coast, some schools down in the South. I am seeing the extent to which there are some good people, but ineffective leadership skills. And I can't even get to the teachers if I can very clearly see that they're not being led well. And so what I want people in current leadership positions to do, and this is going to sound harsh, but there's a couple of things here. Do your work, self-awareness, self-work, truly know that which you are called to do. And if you are not called to be a school leader at this appointed time, then you need to exit. Get out, make the choice and do it for the children.
Yes.
And trust me, if you're someone who I have money, I have mouths to feed, etc. If you move in the direction of your path in life, blessings will come on that path. Mm-hmm. You actually are suffering more being on a path that's not for you.
Yes.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, if you do that and you realize, yes, I am called to this, but there's just certain things I don't know how to do naturally. I know I'm supposed to be here. I've done that work. Then you need to get yourself an executive coach, a principal coach, ask for more help, support, because every day that you try to hide your mess, messing with children's education. Mm-hmm. And so this is where I get to the point where I am all about, let me say this, I am all about advocating for the best education for Black and brown children. And this is the point where I draw the line on race. Like I said, Black, white, Asian, and
it doesn't matter.
It does not matter. If you are bad at your job, you are not serving the children well.
That's right.
Period.
And if you're good at your job, it doesn't matter what color you are, as long as you're serving the children.
I agree. I agree completely.
Yeah. And you opened up. Go ahead.
I would add to that. Being good at your job as an educator in 2023 requires DEI and anti-racism work. I don't want to just leave it there, right? Because one could say, this person is a great adult, great at adult management. They're great at content. They're great at knowing standards and getting test scores, etc. All that's fine and dandy. But if you are not doing that DEIA work, you are actually not serving the children to the best of your ability. So take up your mantle and do that work as well.
And I was about to say, you just opened up a whole other can of topic. And we'll have to have you'll have to come back on the show and we'll talk about more specifically about the DEI and A. Yeah, because that's a whole other deep dive.
You let me know.
Well, I know that we have your contact information down in the notes. And so people will be able to reach you across social and email. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today has been Nadia Bennett. Her contact information is down in the notes. Nadia, thank you so much for coming on. I am looking forward to calling you doctor. So you have to keep me posted there. And you are going to come back on so we can talk about DEI and some more classroom behaviors. And to you equity warriors out there, if you or someone you know is an everyday equity warrior doing amazing things, let me know. We have more awesome and inspiring guests coming up, and maybe you or someone you know should be one of them. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and as always, don't worry about the things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. And I'll see you next time.
That's it for today's episode of the 3E Podcast. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Dr. Berry herself. Be sure to head over to 3epodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Berry's gift. Then join us on the next episode.